Then there are nights when he is just a splendid scorer. And tonight is one of those nights. The Luka Magic is showing out in quarter number one.
Welcome to Inside the Mavs, the official Mavericks podcast of 97.1 The Freak. I'm your host, Kevin Gray, Mavericks pre- and post-game host on the Dallas Mavericks radio network. Appreciate you joining me here for the latest episode of Inside the Mavs. If you're watching this on my YouTube channel, at Kevin Gray Sports, make sure you like and comment on the video and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts for free on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, and give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. We're continuing our preview of the Mavericks taking on the Los Angeles Clippers in the first round of the Western Conference playoffs for the third time in the last 5 years. If you've listened to our other episodes already with Law Murray of The Athletic covering the Clippers and Tim Cato of The Athletic, you are in for a special treat today. I had to go to the other side of the world because I had to look. If I'm going to talk Mavericks basketball, specifically talking about Luka Doncic, there was only one person that I could call to make sure that we had a chance to have a conversation around this particular playoff series. And you can find him on Twitter at Iztok Franko, covering the Dallas Mavericks. Does some great writing and work for D Magazine. Iztok Franko joining me here on the podcast. Iztok, what's going on?
Doing well. Waiting for the playoffs to start. So, like everybody, too much downtime between Mavericks games, so the anticipation is building up.
Yes, very much so. And for the third time in the last 5 years, these two teams are getting together in the postseason. Of course, back in 2020 in the bubble, and then 2021 had a couple-year break, and now they're back playing each other once again. And played a little bit of a clip, against one of the games, not necessarily from the series, but just throughout the years that Luka has played against the Clippers. And we know how much Luka loves playing against the Clippers in particular. What have been your memories so far of this now, what will be trilogy between these two, and how these two teams have differed to get to this point to where we are seeing them play once again in the postseason?
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, all these Clipper games, like you said, to share the clip, the first one, it was like the first playoff run. Everybody was it was Luka's second season. Everybody was like guessing, how will he do in the playoffs? And I think the first game he had like a 40-point triple-double or something like that. High scoring, I think, debut for a rookie, for a first-time playoff game. Then the next year, crazy. Also game winners in that first series. Then next year, COVID, Mavericks go on this 2-0 run. So it's been up and down. Also for me, I remember not only playoffs, but the first time when I came to Dallas, this was like 2 years ago. So I was there for a 5-game home stretch, and 2 of the games were like home at home against the Clippers. It was right when the Porzingis was traded. And I think Luka scored 50 and something in the first game and 46 in the second game. So it was crazy. So I don't know what it is about the Clippers, but it's something that it seems to motivate him a little bit extra. So
yeah,
we can expect fireworks always.
For sure. It is funny because the example that I keep coming back to that I've discussed with other folks, I'm interested in your perspective on it. And you can appreciate the reference being a basketball fan. Michael Jordan had to go through the Detroit Pistons to eventually get to a title. Magic always had Bird. Bird always had Magic. It feels like for Luka, the Clippers are his version of the Pistons, if you will, because at some point it feels like Luka just has to go through Kawhi and Paul George to eventually get to where he wants to go. And yet here we are with another opportunity for him to be able to do it this time around.
I think it's a good reference, yeah. So especially these first 2 series, the Mavericks looked like this younger, smaller brother, yeah. They had like this cool kid, but they were younger, smaller, and the Clippers were just bigger, tougher, and meaner, yeah. So especially, I don't know, that series, I remember in Montrezl Harrell, Morris, so Marcus Morris, Patrick Beverley, they were always like these tough guys that were just a little bit too tough for the Mavericks to handle. And Kawhi, was like a cyborg that nobody knows what to do with. So, but I think this year, like you said, it might be a good opportunity to finally get over that hump. I think after the trade deadline, we've been talking about this for such a long time, but the Mavericks really got bigger and more physical and tougher. So I think that was necessary to compete. But still, we'll see. I tweeted that yesterday when the plane started. I think because there was all this kind of possibilities who the Mavericks could end up playing in the second round, because we know OKC is there, but then we saw now that there was like possibility that Lakers would fall to that 8th spot, or Pelicans, Sacramento, Golden State. But I said whoever it will be, I think the Clippers, if healthy, are the best of all these 5 teams, because they're really a great team, great offensive team. They have so many options, but it's also a lot of question marks lately with the health and also some other things around the team.
And it's interesting you bring that up, because Kawhi, for the most part, has been the healthiest that he's been in quite some time, despite missing the last 8 or 9 games with the knee injury. And, of course, there's a shroud of mystery around him and his knee injury and his availability for Game 1. And I think if you're the Mavericks, you're obviously game planning for him to be ready at the beginning of this series. But when you started to examine this series, and we've known about this matchup for a little while going into the postseason, what strikes you about this version of the Clippers that maybe can give the Mavericks some problems, even with the increased physicality and the way that the Mavericks like to play nowadays?
Yeah, I don't want to throw too many spoilers. I'm working on a deep dive for the magazine for
sure, okay.
So we will do it on Friday. But like you said, going back before what is good about them. So I was talking about the minutes. So it's been the most minutes Kawhi, not only Kawhi, but Paul George, even Harden. But for Kawhi and Paul George, I think it's in 5 years, the most minutes and games they played. And they seemed like they peaked in in December, late November, December, and then January. Kawhi had the best month, Harden had the best month. So we'll see. Nobody knows to speculate what is going on with Kawhi injury or what's going on with the Harden. He had like really down March. So these two, I think, are how they look physically are great question marks. But assuming, let's say, they get back, that this was, let's say, a period where they tried to rest a little bit for the playoffs. What stands out is they have a lot of options. And I think the biggest advantage they have over the Mavericks is the shooting. They are one of the best shooting teams in the NBA. So they have like 4 or 5 guys who all shoot 40% from 3. And this is something that, let's say, apart from how you stop Kawhi, which is really difficult, or even PG, but mostly Kawhi, I think shooting is the biggest thing where I think the Clippers hold an advantage over the Mavericks.
Yeah, a team that can not only really shoot the basketball, but multiple guys that can put the ball on the floor and really get to the rim to be able to finish. When we look at guys like, obviously, with Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, James Harden as well. And for the Mavericks, because I don't think people really appreciate how difficult it is to remake themselves in terms of an identity in the middle of a season. The Mavericks were a team at the beginning of the year, bombed away from the 3-point line, relied on the 3-point shot. But then after the trades, they were able to be much more physical, defend much better, obviously, with Daniel Gafford, Derek Lively coming off the bench, added PJ Washington. How much have you appreciated the fact that they've been able to remake this thing really kind of on the fly to where they've been put themselves as one of the best defensive teams over the last 20 games going into the postseason now?
Oh, it's been crazy. I watched this team in detail, like, let's say, the last 5-6 years, and I imagine that you could see a team that would be best in defense in NBA for more than a month. So it was like really, I think it was kind of, we all had kind of doubts that this is even possible. So not only just around Luka, but also especially around Luka and Kyrie. Yeah? So that was always the worry. Can you build, and I had that concerns, can you build a good defensive team around Luka and Kyrie? But I think the template, and I wrote about this earlier in the year, because we saw a little bit of that template developing when they added Lively, when they added Derrick Jones Jr., when they added Exum. There was glimpses where you could see, okay, maybe if you pair these two guys with like really long, fast, explosive athletes, maybe this is like something different. And we haven't been used to that in prior years with Luka. There was never, the Mavericks were never, let's say, this athletic team or explosive team. And now, one big advantage when we talked before about the shooting that they have over the Clippers is the Clippers are in general, their key players are old and kind of not that athletic anymore. Yeah, so we know PG in his prime was really a great athlete. Kawhi is still a good athlete, but when you look at the team, Westbrook the same. He's still explosive, but in general, they playing more like this kind of slow, deliberate style. And now, all of a sudden, the Dallas Mavericks are the more explosive and, let's say, longer, more athletic team. So this is something that was really, to me, great to watch, not only because they were winning, but from style perspective. And I think it's also kind of tribute, back to your question, to Jay Kidd, to make this work during the season, to Kyrie and to Luka. I wrote also in one D Magazine article, it's amazing. For example, for Luka Doncic-led offense, they used to surround him with shooters, and they were always at the top, setting records in corner threes in the NBA. Then you surround him with athletes, and they are top in NBA in dunks and lobs. So it kind of speaks, it's like kind of speaks volumes, I think, to what kind of talent also Luka is to make this work, especially on the offense, on the fly, I think. But if you look at him, he's so happy, smiling all the time. I think he was waiting for this. So he can unlock some of the easier assists, not only, like you said, being dependent on the three-point shot.
Yeah, the game that I thought of as you were talking about a team going from trying to take and make a bunch of corner threes to dunks and lobs all the time. They gave the Utah Jazz a beat down so bad they had like 18 dunks in the game. Like it was like crazy, just the amount of athleticism that the Mavericks have displayed throughout the course of the year. And before we go any further, let's take a quick break here on Inside the Mavs. More with Iztok Franko of D Magazine covering the Dallas Mavericks. But before we get there, let's hear from today's sponsor of our video and our podcast, and let's hear from Aura. Today's video is brought to you by Aura. Do a Google search on your name and email address to see how much information comes up about you. I was devastated by the amount of information that I could be seeing searching my name and profile, and I knew then I needed to be protected for not just myself, but also for my family. Data brokers sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, email, home address, health records, your relatives, it's all out there. That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it protects me from hackers who could use this information to help them access my social media accounts, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Aura also does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats that I can't see. It's really easy to set up, so I don't have to download several different apps to get things like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more. I get everything at one affordable price. You may already have one of these tools already, but not having Aura is like locking the front door and leaving the back door wide open. Aura is always on, doing the hard work to protect me and my family so I can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. I value my privacy and I value yours. You can go to aura.com/Kevin Gray to start your 2-week free trial. Please see the link in the description. Back here on Inside the Mavs. Appreciate you hanging out with us through that quick break there. And thank you to today's sponsor of our video and our podcast, in Aura. Here with Iztok Franko of D Magazine covering the Dallas Mavericks as we get you ready for the Mavericks taking on the Clippers in the first round of the Western Conference playoffs. That series begins on Sunday. And we were talking about how this team has been able to remake themselves from a team that was shooting threes to a team that's dunking and lobbing all over the place and having fun getting out of transition. And, you know, you started to touch on it. You know, this team begins and ends with Luka Doncic and obviously to a little bit lesser degree with Kyrie Irving. And you know better than anyone the discourse around who the best players are in the league and the ways that we generate, how we come up with those narratives to decide that. It differs from year to year, but I was fascinated and I wanted to get your take on it. The MVP discussion around Luka Doncic, and look, you're smiling already because you knew exactly where I was going with it based off of this. Why has he? I mean, he's had the best offensive season that he's had in his entire career. There's no doubt about that. But what makes him so valuable and special to this group, given what he is able to do night in and night out?
I mean, we can come out with stats, and I will be the first one to come up with some stats and numbers. But to me, especially on the offensive end, we mentioned something. Any piece you put around, it's like instant great offense, yeah. And you can see the guys what Gafford is doing, yeah. is breaking Will Chamberlain records all of a sudden, you know. So it's like he's a great athlete, he's a great lob guy, but again, it's a tribute to how when you put the right personnel, or not even right, when you just put like specific roles around Luka, he'll make it work. But I think when you look at the teams, even play-in, if you look at the playoffs, a lot of teams in general will still try to run actions, run sets to create advantage. That's the most the most basic principle of basketball. You know, you need to create advantage, and then you play off that advantage. And oftentimes people would ask about Dallas why they don't run more complex sets, more complex actions cuts. It's because typically you don't need to when you have Luka Doncic running your offense, you know, because he's like instant advantage. Simple pick and roll, and it's downhill from there. Whatever, and it's just read and react. Whatever the team does, he has an answer to that. So I think that's the most important thing is you're never worried when he's on the floor if the Mavericks will be able to create advantage on basketball and then play off from there. So I think in terms of, like you said, one of the best offensive seasons, also scoring, it's crazy. A lot of things that, let's say, were some of the criticism up to this year was, okay, too many step backs. It's hitting, I don't know, 3-point shot at 35%. Is now almost 48, 49%. Free throws again. So I think this scoring at such a high rate, at crazy efficiency, it's amazing. You don't see many scoring leaders like he was. Won the scoring title at such high efficiency. And especially early in the season, I think that was needed. So I had countless of battles with my analytical and other friends on Twitter over the last 2 weeks because I just hated the narrative that, like, early in the year, because the Dallas was not winning, Luka was not as efficient or as good and I thought the opposite. I thought when Kyrie missed all those games, like almost half of the games in the first part of the season, when they didn't have enough talent, when they had all these injuries, he was basically the one who was carrying the team, and the scoring outputs were needed. So then when they added this talent later on, you could see that the assist would go up, but scoring average would go down a little bit.
Yeah, I think people forget that the Mavericks started off the season 9-3. Like, they got off to a really good start, but obviously from there, you know, things went a little bit south, given the fact, you know, at that point they were still trying to figure some things out. But then they go on a run of where they win 24 or 31 games and get themselves to, you know, 20 games over 500. And you're looking around like, oh, you know what, Luka does have MVP like that. It was like, no, he's been doing this all season long. It's just that maybe you might have been paying attention the way that this season has gone for them. But I think that's what makes this series so good, is because it's a maturing Luka. And that's one of the things I wanted to ask you about, because we've watched him grow and become such a better player in a lot of different areas. But for me, the maturation, I don't know, have anything to do with becoming a father, whatever the case may be. But it seems like at this point in his career, there's a settlement in his game that he understands who he is as a player and how he can affect games night in and night out. And I feel like at this point in his career, he's ready to take that next step, even with already having gone to a Western Conference final. Where do you see Luka as far as his game is concerned, and what that means for this team and how he's matured in his game throughout his career now?
Oh, maturity for sure is a big part, right? So as you age, you said key milestones, you get a kid, he's now 25. I think that's like a logical progression. There was also a lot of written about him building a team around himself to level up conditioning. I know his personal trainer, who is kind of moved from Slovenia, who worked for the national team, to work with him in Dallas. So that part for sure is a big part. But I also think the other part, and I think we will continue. I don't think this is the peak. He's still 25. Sure. So I think the physical peak will come in the next 5 years, 3, 4, 5 years. Yeah. But I think one thing with Luka, and that was always the case, is I think when you build a better team, a lot of the concerns that you have, like frustrations and these up and downs, go away, because I think a lot of his frustrations come from losing. So that's where you would see, let's say, some of the stuff that we were concerned about. And then when you see a good team and they're winning, a lot of these things goes away, because this is what makes him so great, but also sometimes can be his downside, when things, for example, when you have seasons like last year when he gets really frustrated with all the losing. And the one other thing that I would like to point out is Kyrie. I think everybody talks about what a good influence he was, and we all had concerns when the trade was made. But I think how these two made it work, I think is really awesome to watch. So for him, I think taking a step back, seeing another guy take the spotlight, cook in the fourth quarter, that I think is part of his maturity, and it was also part of his concern. Will he, I don't know, give up the ball? And you can see that he's just enjoying this stuff. So he's like all of us. He's like smiling when Kyrie does amazing things. He's like, and I think this is probably the part of this season that I enjoyed the most. It's this chemistry building between these two guys, being willing to enjoy the other guy greatness and have fun and build the chemistry off court, but also on court. I think each of the actions we see every game, there is like something a little bit more. I think now Luka knows where to. I think he has the first time a partner who understands him 100%. So I think Kyrie is the guy, even his main strength is scoring. He will see when Luka is cutting, he will give him the ball the other way around. So this is really amazing to watch. And I think I wrote also about in the past about Denver and then their template for the championship. But if you look back, I think Joker and Murray, I think I checked this stats one point. I think together with playoffs, they played like 12,000 minutes together, So when everybody's now talking about like these are the best two-man game in the NBA, and it really is Jokic and Murray. But these guys been doing this like so much consistency, so much time together. And I think this year we really started to see a lot of these things. It's like in subtle details, because Kyrie and Luka don't need like to run a lot of pick and rolls or handoffs between them. But I think these details in games, there would be like 1, 2, or 3 plays where you could see give and goes between these guys. This is where I see really the growth, and I think this will be their strength in the playoffs because they will build on that, and they have much higher base than they had last year.
Yeah, and you touched on it. I mean, not just the physical skill and what they bring to the floor from a scoring and a passing standpoint, but just the level of basketball IQ between the two of them and watching that be able to grow together. To your point, I think has been incredible to watch in a short amount of time because, I mean, last year they went 5-11 with the two of them on the floor together, but we knew that, look, just give it a little more time, two guys with as good of a game and as good of an IQ for the game as they have, they're going to figure it out. And now that they have, the offensive music that they make together is really spectacular to watch. And it's funny, you talked about the idea of watching these two enjoy each other and have so much fun. Two of my favorite moments of this year, obviously when Kyrie makes that incredible shot against the Denver Nuggets and you just see Luka fall over to the sideline with his hands on his head. Like, I just cannot believe that he made that shot. And then the game against the Rockets where they come back from, 20 some odd points down and they win it in overtime. And you see Luka and Kyrie just embrace each other and just walk to midcourt and the team just comes over to them. That to me, it was like, okay, these two are in it, not just for their teammates, but they're in it for themselves. And I think that was huge and what that could mean for them going into this postseason here for them.
Yeah, no, like I said, I think you never know how people behave, different characters, how competitive, and of course winning cures a lot of this. But I think just these two guys appreciating what the other brings. You were talking about before what makes Luka great, and I was talking about advantages. He's such a persona or such a player with such high usage. He has the ball in his hands. So when the Clippers are doing now their preparation for playoffs, he's the game plan. Harden used to say, I'm the system. I think Luka is the system. And you prepare for this system, and this system will put you in the grinders for like from first possession, and it will just keep grinding and put so much pressure. And Kyrie, basically you have another superstar who is not like the main thing on the game plan. So when in the past, we remember past series, Luka would start crazy, like that game 7 against the Clippers. He would score, I don't know, 45 in the first half, and then he would get tired. And now it's opportunity for Kyrie to shine, and that I think is the great part about this team, because Luka puts so much pressure and reduces the burden, so there is not pressure on Kyrie to, I don't know, be like overly aggressive for 48 minutes, so he can pick his spots. And then I think when the time comes, I think, like I said, I think also Luka appreciates Kyrie to take over, you know. And I think this is like one part of their two games that people thought it's not compatible, but I think it really is. And we saw it a little bit with Jalen Brunson, because at the end they had like this similar dynamic, but I think Kyrie just took this to another level.
Yeah, and I think that's an underrated aspect of this series, because you're right. Watching Luka do all of the work in those first two meetings against the Clippers, now he's got somebody where if Luka has to, can quote-unquote kind of conserve energy at times. That way Kyrie can do his thing, and by the time, and we've seen it throughout the fourth quarters of this year's season, you know, Kyrie in the fourth quarter likes to close and be able to especially get aggressive in those fourth quarters. Then Luka be able to come in, you know, midway through the fourth, and all of a sudden the two of them are able to take over in games. I think that's something that Luka has been desperately missing, that he didn't have in the Clippers series, that he'll definitely have now, is somebody that can take his turn and be able to take over at games, because Kyrie is so dynamic in the ability to do so in that way.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know, I do here in Europe sometimes coaching seminars about analytics for coaches, you know, and every time we talk about analytics, how much data you communicate, or it's always like you need to reduce it or simplify for players to 1-3 things, you know. And I bet even though it's the playoffs, they will prepare in detail, but still, you know, you say, okay, we look, these are the three key things we need to really nail. And typically these 3 things will be how you cover Luka pick and roll coverage, because it's, you know, you really need, that's what I'm saying. So then all of a sudden you nail that part, and then as the second guy comes, you know, it's difficult to prepare for 2 completely different, you know, or 2 guys. So I think that's the benefit, like I said, that Luka brings, but it's that Kyrie then takes to another level. So that's, like you said, they didn't have that in the past. And I think this is what should make us all optimistic. If they're healthy, I think they have really 2 guys that I think can shine in the playoffs.
Before we end today, so give me your overall thought on how you think this series is going to go, given what we know about both of these teams, how they've gotten here, and particularly for the Mavericks, what they like to do, how they'll be able to execute it, and what that means for the series. How do you think the series will go in that way?
Yeah. For starters, like we said, health, it's like really difficult to predict. We'll see in what shape the Clippers come in. It seems that the Mavericks are healthy, which is great. But assuming everybody's healthy, I think I'm optimistic. I mean, I don't underrate the Clippers because they're like a great team. But what I think even this year, the games, they were competitive, all games were competitive, but in the 2 games that the Mavericks lost, they were just like too small, and the Clippers were much more physical. And I think what we saw over the last 2 months is the track record is that Dallas is now can be the more physical team, or if not more physical, they can compete. I think the defense, weirdly enough, gives me confidence that they have now, the first time, like I said, in Luka era, that they have the defensive backbone to fall on. So I think that part is what makes me optimistic that they can win this series.
It should be a lot of fun, because when these 2 teams get together, there's a lot of stars, but at the same time, I feel like if you're a Mavericks fan, you feel like you probably now have the best player on the floor in terms of Luka Doncic and what that means for this series. The fact that these 2 teams are together again is just mind-boggling that we're doing this for a 3rd time, given the fact that of all the permutations that you could come up with for the playoffs, yep, here again, we're with the Clippers again, ready to take on the Mavericks in the first round of the playoffs again.
Yeah, like you said, if you do full circle at the beginning, it's maybe maybe it's meant to be. Maybe it's if they want to take the next step, they need to make that check mark. So they need to beat the Clippers, and then they can go further on.
Yeah, no, that's perfectly well said. Iztok, tell the folks where they can find you and what you got going on, man, for the playoffs.
Yeah, so you mentioned Twitter. They can find me under my name on Twitter. And yeah, I'm doing a deep dive for The Magazine. We plan to publish this probably on Friday before the series starts. So it's going to be fun. Also, we're going to do for these two. I see Clippers fans already complaining about these matinee games. It's too early. I don't know. Maybe James Harden it's too early for him. Apparently they have problems with matinee games this season. But for us in Europe, it's great. So it's this Sunday and next Sunday. So we're doing studio together with Luka's dad and some other people. So before the game, so we'll have these 2 Sundays. So I'm really getting excited for this playoff series. I think it's going to be great. Great basketball.
Yeah, I'm sure you were very excited when you saw the game 1 start time at 2:30 in the afternoon here in our. And what time is that for you there?
For us, it's 9:40 p.m. So it's like prime time Sunday, and it's the same next Sunday. So next week. So these 2 games for sure will be also on prime time on TV. Not like I think he needs additional motivation, but typically, players, I think it's like just additional. I think your friends are watching, Luka's friends are watching, family is watching. So I think when it's on prime time, European times, I think usually there's like an extra gear there.
Sure. Well,
hopefully that will be on Sunday.
Exactly. Hopefully that'll start on Sunday immediately for the Mavericks. Well, Iztok, this was terrific. I appreciate you hanging out with me here on the Inside the Mavs podcast. Your insights are incredible. Look, I'm not even going to lie to you. When I do my game prep for my broadcast that I do for the radio, I go straight to your Twitter because I know Iztok got some nuggets for me to be able to utilize for my pregame prep. So you doing the work, not just for yourself and for everyone else. You're doing it for me too, because some of that stuff is fantastic that I'd like to use for my own work. So I appreciate you personally for the work that you do, man. It's incredible work that you're doing covering this team, man.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for the opportunity and for nice chat.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. That is it for this episode of Inside the Mavs. Again, thank you to Iztok Franko of The Magazine covering the Mavericks for joining me here on this episode. Make sure you download and subscribe to the Inside the Mavs podcast wherever you get your podcast for free. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. And if you're watching this on my YouTube channel, at Kevin Gray Sports, make sure you like and comment on the video as well. We'll continue our episodes this week. Mark Followell of Mavericks Television is going to be joining me this week as well to get you ready for the Mavericks taking on the Clippers. So make sure you're looking out for that episode as well. Again, my name is Kevin Gray, Mavericks pre- and post-game host on 97.1 The Freak, on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. Until then, we'll talk to you later. Peace.